the term feminism. It's derived from the word female, and it's concentrating on the issue of female. Um, in continuing talking about theoretical approaches of political science, it is a must actually to talk about feminism approach. After talking about normative empirical approach, we reached to the point that we could never neglect the importance and the reflection of feminism approach. Actually, it's one of the most controversial approaches that reflected itself um, in a very huge way on the development of the communities, not only the development of the communities, but even the development and the structure of constitutions and political system. So, as we used to do, let's talk about the map that we're going to discuss in this session. We're going to talk about the feminist approach in general, the evaluation, the growth of feminism, features, evaluation. We're going to talk about the movements. I want you to know that the growth of feminism took like six core tracks: liberal, Marxist, social, radical, cultural, ecofeminism. We're not going to go in details on all these levels, but what I want you to notice from this that actually feminism is part of all the later political theories we're going to discuss. Um, in the context of like normative over empirical, normative or empirical, you could like touch them in one or three or even maximum four of the political theories. But feminism turned to be a track in all other political theories in a way or another. Even on those theories which actually refuse the idea of feminism, they still make feminism as a core element of their assumptions. So let's talk in general what is a feminist approach. Feminist approach, um, actually it's part of the feminist political philosophy. It is an area of philosophy that is in a part or in a way focused on understanding and critiquing the way political philosophy is usually constructed or built, often without any attention to feminist concerns or no articulating how political theory might be reconstructed in a way that advances feminist concerns. Uh, in other way, or in other words, to describe political feminist approach, it is putting light on the huge part of this community that used to be out of the theories, out of the calculations of the thinkers and philosophers. Feminist political philosophy is a branch of both feminist philosophy and political philosophy. As a branch of feminist philosophy, it serves as a form of critique or a suspicion of how people react to the idea and the identity of gender. It serves as a way of opening up or looking at how people address gender in community. While political approach or feminist political philosophy, it concentrated on the political track in dealing with these things, looking at the political world as it is usually understood and um, uh, uncovering ways in which women and other current historical or recent concerns, needs are addressed or represented or even addressed. Um, the important point here that I want to talk about is the dangerous thing uh, used to happen that women were not counted as human beings. only men were allowed to vote, were allowed to participate, were allowed to speak, were allowed to express themselves, while women were in another level of citizenship, if you want to call it citizenship. So, um, in front of these two terms, or all this dilemma, thinkers here were confronting two terms actually. Let's talk about feminism as a track and feminism approach to politics. To remove this ambiguity and confusion among the two terms, are they equal? Is it something different about talking about feminism in political science? We have already noted that feminism is a movement whose aim to accelerate the social role of women, because without their role and their participation, its advancement all round progress is particularly impossible. It's like you cannot delete more than half of the community and you still question why this community is not doing any progress. But this concept cannot throw sufficient light on feminists' approach to politics, when it was strongly felt that without women's wholehearted participation in all sorts of social functions, neither social development, emancipation are possible. Neutrally, gender equality has become an issue for great importance. In order to ensure women's participation and realization of their rights, a change in the entire structure of society must be made. It must be made in an effective and realistic levels. This can be done only through political mechanism that restructure the entire political track, the constitution, the entire system inside and outside the community. So, talking about the feminist approach itself, feminist approach to the study of politics is a new age, a new way of development in the evaluation of political science. This approach emerged with growing awareness of the rights of women. We can call it evaluation of feminism. Let's do certain researching about this. First of all, women's suffrage movements of the 19th century and early 20th century was the core beginning of feminism. Uh, it was there, but it wasn't like addressed as real movement. But with the beginning of 19th century, it was announced as feminism. The second wave began in the second half of 19th century. It was concerned more with legal social equality of women. For example, ending the legal discrimination in gender, rights for women to have access and equal opportunities to workplace, rights like heritage, their financial properties, etc., etc. The third wave, it was the continuously progress from the beginning of the second wave, concerned with bringing more questions about how to present gender more and more in all levels. It's not about like giving one sector the rights, it's more about a real integration with the community and with the political system. Uh, Something nice I want to raise up here about the French Revolution in 1789. It was like the first light actually to talk about equality, liberty. Within this, the idea of feminism started to strongly be advocated, especially whenever we talk about equality, gender equality, empowerment of women, equal rights. Actually, this point exactly helped to grow more ideas about feminism. Not only the French Revolution, but also the Declaration of this 19th of the American law. It was a joint in revealing the idea of feminism more and more. We can talk, like, for example, the schools that talked about feminism. Let's talk, first of all, liberal feminism. It is an individualistic form of feminism, asserting gender equality through political and legal forms. For example, equality before the law, it focuses on women's ability to show and maintain their equality through their own actions and choices. Marxist feminism, highlighting the theoretical relevance of understanding the gender oppression. It emphasized that um, the problem over feminism is a product of the social structure as a whole. And in order to solve this problem, we need to reconstruct the community as a whole. A third school of feminism, we can talk about social feminism. Social feminist thinkers or track is tracing the root of all oppression, whether economic factors, whether business factors, etc. Um, the idea here is exploitation of women in the forms of low wages for the same type of work. It also highlights the negative role of the institution of the family, especially the power or the authority of the family on giving the identity of women and the role of women, and the birth of new idea about gender identity. And this is very important. The core idea of social feminism is to link the problems of feminism with the role of the family. Fourth school is the radical feminism. Radical feminism became aware of their own oppression, and it stressed on ending all kind of discrimination, ending all tracks of classifying women as level number 2 or citizen 2. Let's talk about cultural feminism. It's not political in the general context. It assumes that women are kind, warm, very nice. They are in a certain frame, and this frame was shaped by certain cultural background, maybe about from religious, maybe traditions, norms, etc., etc. But this form, this identity, this function is no more acceptable, especially after the war, after the Industrial Revolution. This type of role is a little bit unacceptable anymore. It's like a changing of identities. Let's talk about ecofeminism. It merges ecology with feminist theory. It stressed on the respect of all living being. Uh, Actually, in which school that we talk, there is one core point, which is that the idea of changing the identity of women is the core task. It's not only changing the rights, it's changing the identity, how people address women. So, the main features of the feminist approach are as following. Number one, root of all problems in gender is inequality. Feminist thinkers emphasize that gender inequality is the root caused all the problems of gender inequality, of political problems, and the gender issues, and the problems that women face. It condemned the established theories of the state on the ground that such ignore the equal rights of women and make them more controlled by male and all issues. For example, all governments are dominated by men. All decisions are taken by men. Um, Local, national, international. Uh, we are talking actually about that age, definitely. All decisions were taken by men, and a huge part of the community was excluded for certain reasons. So feminists started to highlight that if women will not be integrated, all these decisions will be invalid. They highlighted what they see as the political relationship between um, how women are under controlled, dependent on a system that is totally masculine and controlled by men. So, reason number two, or feature number two, stands for women's liberation and empowerment. Feminism is a belief in the right of women and equality with men. It's like asking for the equal rights for each citizen, regardless whether they are male or female. It takes the view for betterment and emancipation of women in society, supported for women's rights in politics and in life in general. Uh, Actually, this approach criticizes the male biasing system. Feminist approach to political studies is based on the assumption that governments, laws, constitutions, and citizens, uh, the bureaucratic and civil community are all controlled by men in that time. They are based on a system wherein men are considered to be superior to women. Um, Under this idea, any demand women will make will not be achieved unless men accepted this demand. And this is exactly what called uh, um, excluding women from the entire picture. Dispersing women from the entire picture of communities definitely will create unstable, undemocratic um, communities that will never be able to develop in a good way. Number four, tackles problems of women. The feminist approach formulates theories that seeks to resolve gender biasing. It finds solutions to the problem of women and suggested methods to fix these problems. Number five, clubbed with other approaches. Actually, the nice or the interesting part here is that feminist approach usually adopted a lot of tracks with other approaches, especially normative, empirical, comparative, other approaches. For example, to study women behaviors and voting, we need like to use empirical tools. To study women a new function and economic, we need comparative tool. So the nice thing about this approach, it created a mixture with all other tools. Let's talk a little bit about the advantages of this approach. It is considered about the problems of women. It is concentrated on real issues. It's very realistic. Um, it's not about only problems, it's about empowerment, giving the power for one important part of the community. Feminist political researchers studied and find solutions to problem of women, problems relevant to poverty, crimes against women, discrimination, etc. Feminist approach added a woman touch to global leadership, peace initiatives, cultural exchanges, literacy. etc. Nowadays, it's like definitely after decades, we can see women in very political, in very important political positions, women leading institutions, women leading armies, for example, etc. Also, feminism has gained growing respect as a distinctive school because it has shed new light upon establishing concepts such as power, domination, equality. It tried to create new ideas that reflect the human rights as general, and this is very important in the years where thinkers, philosophers, used to demand with large scale of human rights. The domestic, professional, and public roles of women, at least in developed societies, have undergone a major transformation due to feminist approach is there nowadays. We can, as we said a moment ago, we can see women leading government, women leading societies. But as any approach, we can talk about some problems or critics, let's say. Some thinkers said that the assumption of feminists that only men create women problems, it's not correct, because they assume that women is the largest problem for women. And some thinkers gave a very fun example about motherhood, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, and they always saying that women are the first enemy for women. The second critic says that tracing all women's problems to gender bias is a wrong assumption, because some problems are actually common between men and women, which makes this approach is not sufficient in all problems. Let's talk about the historical track of feminism quickly. Feminist approach started very early from Greek, China, India. Through these countries in their history, we can see women with special positions, and women were very honored in these cultures, sorry. While in other cultures, women were treated as slaves. So we don't want to be unfair to say that all cultures treated women in a bad way. No, we should say that some countries and others no. An important point here we should raise is that the age of enlightenment started to spotlight in a great way on feminism. It created a track, it actually paved the way in front of feminism to start new tendency, to start be more strong in dealing with issues and addressing communities, addressing decision makers. The age of enlightenment was the engine of a lot of sounds in feminism. Um, Actually, let's talk a little bit about the progress of this approach. There are a lot of thinkers, philosophers who started this approach. But actually, to be a fair, Wollstonecraft's contribution is one of the core contributions in feminism. At the end of the 18th century, it was really very courage, a very remarkable effort to fight for the cause of women. In the above notice about this author, she wrote a lot of books talking about the right of women. I want to mention one quote for that. She said, if the abstract rights of man will peer discussion and explanations, those of women, by a parity of reasons, will not shrink from the same test. She was one of the most important authors and thinkers starting talking about equality and common rights, etc. Actually, one of the core problems that feminism faced from the beginning is the structure of the community, the structure of the society itself. It is not only the political structure, it's even the social structure. And that was so obvious in all the literature that described feminism and the relation between feminism and political science. They used to say that the core obstacle in changing the stereotype of women is the community and the social structure, the norms, etc. Because they put women in certain category, and the resistance to a change was so high. In contrast, for example, to change the stereotype of, for example, farmers, or to refuse the idea of slaves. It is not easy, but it was harder than the idea of gender. Actually, we have four waves of feminism. We're going to mention them very quickly. The first wave, which took place in the last or the late 19th and early 20th, emerging out of an environment of urban industrialism, liberalism, blah, 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 blah. The goal of this wave was to open up opportunities for women and to open a gate for more integration. This first wave wasn't like clear about what kind of equality, as much as they wanted to be heard. They wanted to be there on the map. The thing that paved the way in front of the second wave. Based on the first wave, the second wave was more mature. It began in 1960s, continued in 90s. This wave unfolded in the context of the anti-war, the civil rights movement, the growing of self-consciousness, of variety of minority groups around the world. By this time, a lot of changes had occurred that helped in addressing more rights for women and helped in creating more acceptance towards women's rights. Actually, it was very important to talk about the changes of the context that helped to have better, let's say, context of this um, idea. So, let's talk about the third wave of feminism, which began in mid 90s. It informed by post-colonial and postmodern thinking. In this phase, the construction was a little bit different. They were new ideas, notions like universal womanhood, talking about more clear idea about body, gender, sexuality, gender rights, gender equality, aspects of a new political social role of women. If we're gonna talk about the third wave and a more depth way, we should say in this term, this wave start to ask for a global identity for feminism. They refuse to link feminism to certain, for example, nationality, because they wanted to raise feminism to the level of a human being that is much important to protect the minimum level of rights. Exactly, in a very huge way, but the idea was growing wave after wave. After talking about these waves in general, I want to talk about four elements. I want to talk about, let's discuss the track of the history. Do you think feminism now is the face of feminism that started like in the beginning of the approach. Do you think feminism nowadays is really addressing all women rights? I mean, do you think feminism is the same identity here, for example, in Gaza and Palestine, as it's addressed in Egypt, for example, or in Saudi, or for example, Emirates? This drives us to the second element. I want you to think and tell me what you think about sectors of feminism. Do you think it's only about politics, and do you think it's, I mean, who's larger now? Is it politics larger than feminism, or it's the opposite way? Can we say like feminism now is a track inside each sector of our life? What is the relation between feminism and economics, for example? Let's talk a little bit in a more realistic way and talk about our reality in Gaza. Do you think our political system reflects this approach in a good way? Let's talk, for example, about quota. What do you know about quota system? Are you with or against? Why you are with and why you are against? Do you think it's fair enough? Let's talk about CEDAW also agreement. Do you think who affects the other more? Does the feminist parties groups affect politics more, or it's vice versa? And to which level do you think nowadays communities can control the role of women? Do you think we still have the same identity of women? Do you think we can trust women to lead communities anymore? Is this will Do you think this even can create a new pattern of politics? Okay, with all these questions, I think we reached to the puzzle of today. I want you to answer two questions. Question number one, I want you to talk about two international laws that are acceptable in Gaza and Palestine, and other two laws which are unacceptable and relevant to feminism approach. Thank you so much for joining me for this lesson. Always be safe, and remember, things are not what you see, they are exactly what you want to see. Take care.